The stars above Illyria shone like silver dust scattered across endless darkness. From orbit, the world looked perfect. Oceans glowing softly under twin moons, cities built with elegant curves, and lights arranged in perfect symmetry. Everything about Illyrian society reflected order, balance, and purpose. Nothing existed without meaning, and no individual was allowed to stand outside the expectations of their people. Lyra stood alone inside the tribunal chamber, surrounded by towering crystalline pillars that reflected pale blue light. The air felt cold, despite the warm glow, and every sound echoed with sharp clarity. Rows of elders watched her silently, their expressions calm but distant. They did not look angry. They did not look cruel. They simply looked certain. That certainty hurt more than anger ever could. Lyra kept her posture straight, her hands folded behind her back as she had been taught since childhood. She had trained her whole life to serve Illyria. She had studied healing, traveled to distant colonies during outbreaks, and helped wounded soldiers during border conflicts. She had always believed that service gave meaning to existence, but today, none of that mattered. The elder at the center raised his hand slightly, signaling the beginning of the final declaration. "Lyra of House Solari," he said, his voice smooth and emotionless. "You have been evaluated according to the continuity doctrine."
Medical analysis confirms irreversible infertility. Under ancient law, individuals unable to contribute to generational survival lose full societal status.
Lyra felt the words strike her like invisible blows. She had already heard them during previous hearings. Yet hearing them spoken again in front of the entire council made the reality heavier. She kept her face calm. Illyrians valued composure above all. "You have served with distinction," the elder continued. "Your achievements are acknowledged. However, contribution to future generations remains the highest duty." A soft murmur moved through the chamber. Not sympathy. Simply agreement. Lyra lowered her gaze briefly. She knew this moment was coming. Still, part of her hoped that her years of service might change their decision. "The tribunal has reached consensus," the elder said. "You are to be released from citizen status and exiled beyond the outer colonies. Support will be limited. Survival will depend upon individual capability." The words were spoken as if describing a routine procedure. No anger. No compassion. Only law. Lyra felt something break quietly inside her chest. She had healed children, saved elders, risked her life during outbreaks. Yet, in a single moment, she became unnecessary. She bowed her head in acknowledgement, because refusing to accept the ruling would only make things worse. As she turned to leave, she noticed that many observers avoided looking at her. Friends she had known for decades looked away politely. No one wanted to be associated with someone declared biologically incomplete. The chamber doors began to close. Then a sharp chime interrupted the silence. The holographic interface flickered to life near the center of the room. One of the attendants spoke quickly to the elders, confusion visible for the first time on their faces. "A transmission request has been received," the attendant said. "Origin, human diplomatic channel." A quiet ripple moved through the chamber. Humans, they were relatively new to the galactic community. Loud, emotional, unpredictable. Many older species considered them unstable, because they often challenged traditions without hesitation. The elder hesitated before nodding. "Allow it." A figure appeared in the projection field, a human male with dark hair and steady eyes. He wore simple civilian clothing rather than formal diplomatic attire, which immediately made several elders uncomfortable. "My name is Daniel Hale," he said calmly. "I request recognition under Interspecies Legal Clause 47. The chamber grew silent. Even Lyra paused mid-step, surprised. The elder's tone sharpened slightly. "State your purpose." Daniel's gaze moved across the chamber until it settled on Lyra. There was no pity in his expression, only quiet determination. "I am invoking cross-species guardianship rights," he said. "The individual known as Lyra has been sentenced to cultural exile. Under Clause 47, a sentient from another recognized civilization may assume responsibility and offer protected relocation." The chamber erupted into whispers. Lyra's breath caught. She had never heard of such a law being used in living memory. "That clause exists only for extreme circumstances," one elder said sharply. Daniel nodded. "Correct. And I believe this qualifies." Another elder leaned forward. "Human, you do not understand our traditions." "Maybe not completely," Daniel replied, still calm. "But I understand losing someone valuable because of rigid systems." Humanity has made that mistake before. Lyra felt a strange warmth at his words, not because she believed him, but because someone was speaking for her when no one else would. "This is not your concern," an elder said. "It became my concern when I learned someone who saved thousands was being discarded," Daniel answered. The elders exchanged silent looks, communicating through subtle gestures. Finally, the central elder spoke again. "If guardianship is accepted, the responsibility becomes yours. Her status among our people will not be restored." "I understand," Daniel said. Lyra felt confusion swirling through her thoughts. She had never met this human. Why would he interfere? The elder turned toward her. "Lyra of House Solari, do you accept transfer?" For a moment, she hesitated. Everything she had known was here, even if it no longer welcomed her. But exile alone meant slow death. "I accept." The decision was finalized quickly, almost coldly. Documents were processed, and her identity shifted from Illyrian citizen to interspecies ward. Within hours, she stood aboard a human vessel leaving Illyrian space. The ship felt completely different from Illyrian technology. Instead of silent perfection, there were soft mechanical hums, uneven textures, and signs of use everywhere. It felt alive rather than flawless. Daniel met her in a quiet observation room overlooking the stars. He did not approach too closely, giving her space. "Welcome," he said gently. Lyra studied him carefully. Humans looked less refined than Illyrians, but there was something steady about him. "Why?" she asked simply. He seemed to understand what she meant. "Because someone needed to," he replied.
"That is not a logical explanation."
He smiled slightly. "Humans don't always choose logic first." Outside the window, Illyria faded into the distance. Lyra felt grief rise unexpectedly. Despite everything, it was still her home. Daniel noticed her silence but did not interrupt. Instead, he stood beside her, quietly, sharing the view. After some time, he spoke again. "You're not a burden where we're going?" The words felt strange, almost unbelievable. She said nothing, unsure whether to trust them. As the ship entered hyperspace, streaks of light filled the window, carrying her away from everything she had ever known. For the first time in her life, Lyra had no defined role, no clear purpose, and no expectations guiding her path. Only uncertainty, and a human who had chosen her without hesitation. She did not yet realize that this decision would change not only her life, but the way the galaxy viewed humanity itself. The human ship moved smoothly through hyperspace, surrounded by endless streaks of light that looked like flowing rivers across the darkness. Lyra stood near the observation window, watching quietly. She had never traveled inside a human vessel before, and everything felt different from Illyrian ships. Nothing was perfectly symmetrical. Panels showed small scratches. Lights varied in brightness, yet the space felt warm and alive. Daniel gave her time to adjust. He did not ask many questions during the first days. Instead, he showed her where she could rest, where food was prepared, and how to use basic systems on the ship. His patience confused her. Illyrians valued efficiency, and conversations usually focused only on necessary information. Humans seemed to value something else. During meals, Daniel sometimes spoke about small things. Music, landscapes on Earth, strange human traditions. He laughed easily, even at simple jokes. Lyra listened more than she spoke, trying to understand the strange emotional openness humans carried. One evening, as they sat quietly in the dining area, she finally asked, "Do humans often intervene in other species' laws?" Daniel considered the question carefully before answering.
Not always, but sometimes humans see rules that hurt people more than help them.
When that happens, some of us step forward. That creates conflict, Lyra said.
Yes, he agreed calmly. But doing nothing can create worse outcomes.
Illyrian teachings had always emphasized harmony through obedience. Humans seemed willing to disrupt harmony if they believed it protected someone. The idea unsettled her. After several days, the ship arrived near human territory. The stars changed as they exited hyperspace, revealing busy trade routes filled with ships of different sizes and shapes. Lyra watched in quiet amazement as vessels moved freely, without the strict formation common among Illyrians. "Welcome to human space," Daniel said gently. The planet Earth appeared ahead, blue oceans, swirling clouds, and green continents filled with life. Lyra felt a strange tightness in her chest as she saw it. It looked imperfect compared to Illyria, but also vibrant and unpredictable. The descent into atmosphere was louder than she expected. The ship vibrated slightly, and she instinctively gripped the edge of her seat. Daniel noticed and smiled. "First atmospheric entry? Yes. It always feels dramatic," he said. Humans like dramatic. She almost smiled at that. When they landed, Lyra stepped onto Earth's surface slowly. The air felt thicker than Illyrian atmosphere, carrying unfamiliar scents. Sounds filled the environment, distant voices, vehicles moving, wind brushing against trees. Everything felt alive. Humans passed by without staring too long. Some looked curious but continued walking. No one turned away in silent judgment. That alone surprised her. Daniel guided her through a city filled with tall buildings, colorful signs, and moving crowds. Humans of different appearances walked side by side, speaking different languages. No single pattern defined them.
"Humans are diverse," Lyra said quietly.
"That's one way to describe us," Daniel replied with a soft laugh. He brought her to a residential area surrounded by green spaces. Children ran through a park nearby, laughing loudly. Animals moved freely alongside people. The environment felt relaxed and unstructured compared to Illyrian society. Inside Daniel's home, she noticed signs of personal life everywhere. Pictures on walls, books stacked unevenly, plants growing in corners. Nothing was perfectly arranged, yet everything felt meaningful. "You can stay here as long as you need," Daniel said. "Why offer so much?" she asked. "Because someone once did the same for me," he answered simply. She did not ask further. Days turned into weeks as Lyra slowly adapted. Human food tasted stronger than Illyrian meals, filled with spices and flavors she had never experienced. Conversations flowed freely, and strangers sometimes greeted her with friendly curiosity instead of cautious distance. Still, she struggled internally. Years of conditioning told her she lacked purpose. Even when humans smiled at her, part of her expected rejection, Daniel never pressured her to change. Instead, he invited her to observe human life at her own pace. One morning, he brought her to a community center. Inside, people worked together on different activities: learning, healing, teaching. Lyra noticed a group of children gathered around a table, listening to a volunteer read stories aloud.
"These children have no biological parents?" she asked quietly.
"Some do, some don't," Daniel said.
"Families come in many forms here." Lyra watched as a small child struggled to write words on a digital screen. The volunteer encouraged him patiently, celebrating even small progress.
The moment felt unfamiliar. Illyrian children were raised within strict family structures focused on lineage. Here, care extended beyond bloodlines. Something shifted inside her. She asked cautiously, "May I assist?" Daniel nodded without hesitation. Lyra approached the group slowly, unsure how they would react to her alien appearance. Instead of fear, the children showed curiosity. "Your skin shines," one child said with wonder. Lyra hesitated before answering gently, "That is natural for my species." Soon she found herself guiding them through basic learning exercises. Her voice remained calm, her movements precise, shaped by years of healing training. The children responded quickly, trusting her without question. For the first time since her sentencing, she felt useful. Over the following weeks, she returned often. She helped with education, offered basic medical advice, and slowly built connections with humans who valued her skills rather than her reproductive ability. One evening, Daniel asked, "How does it feel?" She thought carefully before answering. "Different. I do not feel incomplete here." He smiled softly but did not comment further. Unknown to her, observers from multiple species monitored her integration. Reports traveled across the galaxy, describing how humans treated individuals based on ability rather than biological expectation. Some species admired this flexibility. Others viewed it as dangerous. Among the Illyrians, debates began quietly. Younger generations questioned whether exile laws truly strengthened their society. The tribunal remained silent publicly. The tension grew. One day, a formal transmission arrived. Daniel's expression darkened slightly as he read it. "What is it?" Lyra asked. "A diplomatic request," he said carefully.
The Illyrian Tribunal wants to review your status.
Her chest tightened.
They have authority?
She asked. "Legally, your guardianship protects you," Daniel said, "but they can still request negotiation." She remembered the cold chamber, the certainty in the elders' voices. "Perhaps I should return voluntarily," she said quietly. "If my presence causes conflict," Daniel shook his head gently. "Humans don't give up people just to make situations easier. You would risk tension between civilizations?" "Yes," he answered simply. "Because you matter." The words settled deeply inside her. For the first time, she began to believe that someone truly saw value in her existence beyond duty or biology. As night fell outside, Lyra stood on a balcony overlooking Earth's skyline. Lights stretched into the distance, glowing softly like stars brought down to the surface. She realized she was no longer the same person who left Illyria. But she also knew the past had not finished with her. Somewhere far away, decisions were being made, and those decisions would soon test both her strength and humanity's promise to protect its own. The Illyrian Tribunal's request had arrived quietly, but with weighty authority. Daniel read the message again and again, his jaw tight. The tribunal wanted Lyra returned, not for punishment, but for review. They claimed her presence among humans undermined Illyrian traditions, and that her survival outside their society was unacceptable. Lyra felt a tight knot in her stomach. She had grown accustomed to Earth, to humans, to the quiet sense that she was no longer just a burden or failure. But the message reminded her that her past was never far behind, and that her life of freedom could be taken away at any moment. "Do they expect me to go back?" she asked, softly.
Daniel shook his head. "They hope you will."
"They think you will see it as a duty and return." Lyra looked out at the city lights beneath her balcony. "If I go back, I am only a number to them again. I will never be more than what they decide I am." "That is why you won't go," Daniel said. "Because humans do not abandon those they protect. Not now, not ever." For several days, they prepared. Humans began coordinating a diplomatic response to Illyrian pressure. In the meantime, Lyra continued her work at the community center. The children had grown fond of her, laughing at her small mistakes, learning from her calm guidance. Their trust gave her courage she had never experienced before, but news arrived that created a ripple of fear across human and Illyrian authorities alike. An outbreak of an unknown pathogen had struck a minor Illyrian colony. Reports described rapidly spreading illness, weakening even the strongest Illyrians, and threatening entire communities. Their advanced medicine struggled to contain it. The tribunal had no choice. They could not risk losing more lives. Desperately, they sent a formal request for assistance, including humans. The same humans who had protected Lyra. Lyra's heart tightened. She remembered the tribunal's words of judgment, the cold eyes that declared her unworthy. And yet, now her knowledge, the very skills that had once defined her, could save them. The irony was sharp, almost cruel. Daniel saw the conflict in her eyes. "This is your choice," he said quietly. "You can stay hidden and safe, or you can go and help. You have the power to change things. I trust you." Lyra thought of the children she had helped, of the humans who had given her care without condition, and of her own life filled with more purpose than she had ever imagined. She nodded. "I will go." Traveling through hyperspace to the affected colony, Lyra prepared herself mentally. She had trained for outbreaks before, but this time was different. She was returning to the very species that had once condemned her, now as a healer, a savior, and a symbol of what they had overlooked. When the human ship arrived, the Illyrian colony looked more desperate than reports had suggested. Buildings normally clean and orderly were abandoned in places, and the air carried a faint metallic scent. Illyrians stumbled, weak and frightened, their usual grace replaced by vulnerability. Lyra felt her stomach tighten, but she reminded herself that she was not helpless. Years of training had prepared her to respond in chaos. She moved quickly, coordinating with human medical teams to assess patients, isolate infection zones, and organize supplies. Her knowledge of Illyrian biology proved invaluable. Humans could treat symptoms effectively, but only Lyra understood the subtleties of their immune systems, the way their bodies responded to infection, and the methods required to stabilize them. Elders arrived at the makeshift medical center, their eyes wide as they watched her direct human teams. Lyra worked tirelessly, moving from patient to patient, adjusting treatment protocols, and explaining measures to Illyrians who were too weak to follow instructions alone. Hours turned into days, and exhaustion pressed down on her. But she refused to stop. Each life saved reminded her of her worth, and she began to see faces that had once ignored her, now looking at her with hope and gratitude. Some Illyrians whispered to one another, questioning the logic of their past decisions. How could someone they had declared unworthy possess such knowledge, such effectiveness, and such courage? The Tribune's official delegation arrived to oversee the recovery. They observed from a distance, but murmurs spread quickly through their ranks. Younger Illyrians spoke up, challenging old assumptions, suggesting that rules should adapt to new understanding, and that Lyra's actions were proof that rigid tradition could cause harm. One elder, stern and unmoved, approached her.
"You defied our law. You should not have been here," he said.
Lyra looked at him calmly. "I did not defy law."
I saved lives. That is what matters.
His eyes narrowed, but even he could not deny the results. Illyrians were recovering under her guidance, and the humans worked efficiently alongside her. Lives were saved, and the colony's stability was restored. Daniel observed silently from the edge of the room, allowing Lyra to take the lead. She moved with quiet authority, precise and confident. Humans respected her expertise, and even Illyrians began to follow her directions. At night, she sat in the small medical wing, exhausted but reflective. She had risked her life returning to a society that once condemned her, and yet in doing so, she had become indispensable. The knowledge she had once thought meaningless outside Illyrian society now proved critical to survival. The experience shifted something deep inside her. Worth was not defined by lineage, by law, or by tradition. It was defined by action, by courage, and by compassion. Humans understood this naturally, and in saving Illyrians, she had found her own strength as a human ally and as an individual. As the days passed, reports of her success spread to other colonies. BCs across nearby systems began taking note of the human-led operation and the effectiveness of combining Illyrian knowledge with human flexibility. Conversations that had been theoretical debates now had tangible proof. Humans were capable of leadership, strategy, and compassion in ways many species had underestimated. The tribunal convened again to discuss her status. Some elders argued that her survival was an embarrassment, proof that humans disrupted their society. Others acknowledged that her actions had saved countless lives, and that a rigid insistence on tradition could have cost them dearly. Lyra knew she would be called again before the council. The weight of her past and the expectations of multiple species pressed upon her. She did not fear the elders' words, but she understood that her choices now carried consequences far beyond herself. When she was finally summoned, she entered the council chamber flanked by human representatives. The elders watched, their expressions carefully controlled, but Lyra noticed the subtle tension in their movements. This was no longer a simple hearing about a single individual. It was a test of values, of tradition versus reason, of fear versus courage. She spoke calmly, directly, and without hesitation.
I did not seek to defy your law. I sought to save lives.
That is the purpose of knowledge, and the measure of worth is not only what you are born to do, but what you choose to do when faced with the opportunity to act.
A silence followed.
No one spoke immediately. Then a younger elder nodded subtly, and whispers spread across the chamber. Some openly questioned whether laws that condemned the incapable were fair. Others argued that the success of humans in collaboration showed that rules needed adaptation. The tribunal was forced to reconsider not only Lyra's status but also the rigid cultural structure that had condemned her. Across the galaxy, news of her actions began to shift perceptions. Humanity, once considered chaotic and unpredictable, now demonstrated clarity, purpose, and strength rooted in empathy. Lyra felt a quiet satisfaction. She had returned to face those who had once deemed her unworthy, not in anger or fear, but with action. Lives were saved, knowledge respected, and the galaxy was beginning to see humans in a new light. Daniel placed a hand lightly on her shoulder, a silent gesture of support. You did what you had to do, he said. Yes, she replied. And they finally see that worth is more than birthright. The night outside the chamber was quiet, but inside, the echoes of her choices were already reshaping the future. She understood that her journey was far from over, but for the first time, she felt that she truly belonged. Not because of what law dictated, but because she had proven, through courage and wisdom, that life itself was worth protecting. The galaxy watched, the humans watched, and Lyra, once discarded, stood firmly at the center, not as a victim, but as a living example of humanity's power to value life where others had failed. And in that realization, a new chapter was beginning, not only for her, but for every being who had once underestimated the strength of one determined individual. Lyra stepped into the tribunal chamber once more. The hall felt colder than before, though she had already faced its harsh silence and survived. This time, the weight of her actions followed her. The colony had been saved, thousands of lives preserved, and the galaxy was watching. Every step she took echoed in the wide chamber, reminding everyone present that she was no ordinary being. Elders and observers filled the room. Some wore expressions of pride, though reluctant, while others appeared tense, struggling to reconcile tradition with reality. Daniel stood near the back, silent but unwavering, watching her with a calm presence that steadied her own nerves. An elder spoke first, his voice low but firm. Lyra of House Solari, you have returned to us after human intervention.
You have acted outside Illyrian law. You have disrupted our societal expectations.
Lyra held her head high. She did not flinch, though her heart raced. She had prepared herself for the coldest judgment imaginable, yet she had something new now, proof of her value, undeniable in the results she had achieved. I did not disrupt law, she said, her voice steady. I acted to save lives. When rules threaten life rather than preserve it, the measure of action is not disobedience, but responsibility. I have done my duty, and it has protected countless Illyrians. The chamber grew quiet. Observers exchanged glances. It was rare for someone to speak so plainly, so truthfully, to the elders, without fear. One of the senior elders, with silver-toned skin and eyes sharp as crystal, leaned forward. Your success does not erase your disobedience, he said. No, Lyra replied. It does not erase what happened, but it proves that worth is not limited to a single definition. Life is not measured only by what tradition says, but by what one chooses to do when facing challenge and danger. You once said I was unworthy because I could not reproduce. I have shown that I am capable of saving life, guiding knowledge, and inspiring others. That is worth. A murmur spread through the chamber. Some younger Illyrians whispered agreement, citing the colony's recovery. Others fidgeted, unwilling to speak, but clearly affected by the logic of her words. Daniel stepped slightly forward. Lyra's actions demonstrate something your traditions often fail to acknowledge. Humanity has always valued choice, courage, and compassion. We protect those who cannot protect themselves, not because it is law, but because it is right. The galaxy has watched, and the example she has set changes perception.
It is not rebellion, it is leadership!
Several elders stiffened at his words, but even they could not deny the evidence before them. Lyra had worked with humans to save Illyrians. Hundreds of lives had survived because of her guidance. Even the hardest-hearted observer could not ignore that fact. One of the elder women, known for her strict adherence to tradition, finally spoke. Her voice was sharp but thoughtful.
We cannot undo law lightly.
But perhaps we must consider whether the law itself is the problem. What good is tradition if it destroys life rather than preserves it? Lyra held her breath. That single statement, tentative though it was, represented a crack in centuries of rigid thinking. The chamber fell into debate. Some elders argued that humans had overstepped, interfering with Illyrian sovereignty. Others pointed out that strict adherence to outdated rules could endanger society. Lyra listened quietly, understanding that her presence had shifted the balance. She had not only saved lives, she had forced her people to question themselves. Finally, the senior elder who had first condemned her spoke again. His voice was measured. Lyra of House Solari, you have returned despite danger. You have acted with skill, courage, and intelligence.
The tribunal recognizes that the law must evolve in the light of experience. We acknowledge that the outcome of your actions proves that rigid tradition is not always correct.
Your survival and success demonstrate value beyond reproduction. Henceforth, your exile is lifted, and you are restored as a citizen of Illyria. Furthermore, the tribunal will review all laws that limit worth to biological function. A quiet gasp spread across the chamber. Lyra felt a strange mix of relief, disbelief, and exhaustion. She had faced death in exile, risked her life to help a species that had once condemned her, and now, against all odds, the society that rejected her acknowledged her worth. Daniel stepped forward and nodded, his eyes showing quiet pride. Lyra allowed herself a small smile. Thank you, she whispered, though her voice barely carried across the chamber. The senior elder inclined his head. Your courage has changed, not only your life, but the lives of many. We will ensure that your contributions are recorded, not only in history, but in the law itself. For the first time in years, Lyra felt complete. She had been judged, sentenced, and exiled. Yet she had survived through determination, knowledge, and courage. Her existence had reshaped society, challenged ancient traditions, and strengthened the bond between humans and Illyrians. Later, as she walked through the restored chambers, she noticed younger Illyrians watching her with awe. They whispered quietly among themselves, curious and inspired by her journey. She realized that her impact would last for generations, not only through the lives she had saved, but through the example she had set. Daniel joined her on a balcony overlooking the Illyrian capital. The city lights reflected off the crystal towers, gleaming softly in the evening sky. "You've done more than survive," Daniel said quietly. "You've changed the galaxy." Lyra took a deep breath. "I only did what I could. Humans showed me that life has more meaning when you act, not just follow rules. Perhaps my people are beginning to see that too."
He nodded. They are.
"And the galaxy will notice." For the first time, Lyra felt that she truly belonged, not because the law had allowed it, but because she had earned it, through courage, wisdom, and compassion. She looked at the stars above, imagining the countless worlds beyond, knowing that humanity's influence extended further than she had ever realized. The Illyrian tribunal would continue to debate and adapt. Other species would witness humanity's resolve and willingness to protect life. Lyra's story would become a symbol, proof that one individual could challenge rigid tradition and inspire change, that worth could not be measured by simple rules, and that humanity's greatest strength was the ability to act with empathy, courage, and intelligence. As night settled over Illyria, Lyra stood beside Daniel in quiet reflection. The trials of the past years seemed distant now. She had faced exile, alien judgment, and her own doubts, yet she emerged stronger. She was no longer simply a healer or a survivor. She had become a bridge between species, a living example of the value of choice, and a testament to the strength of those who refused to let others be discarded. And the galaxy had learned something important. Sometimes, the ones who appear weakest, who are judged by the strictest rules, are the very ones who can inspire change and save countless lives. Lyra smiled softly as she looked at Daniel.
"I understand now," she said quietly. "Worth is not just life or law."
"It is what we do with the life we have that is what defines us." He nodded. "And the galaxy is better for it." The night stretched across the capital, quiet but alive. And Lyra knew that her journey had only begun, not because of exile, not because of rules, but because she had chosen courage, action, and hope. Humanity had shown her that even in a vast, ordered galaxy, one person's choices could echo across worlds, shaping the future in ways no law could predict. For the first time, she felt free, not just alive, but truly alive.